Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this edition of the program Jones and Company. On this program we examine national issues. If you ask trade unionists in the country what is the state of affairs in the country today, they will all tell you that they are unhappy of the labor relations with the government of the Bahamas today. And so the mood among trade unionists, they are not a lot of happy campers. And so on our program today we are going to talk about the trade union movement in our country, where it is, and the relations with the government of the Bahamas and other institutions in our country. Our guests on the program today, Mr. Obie Ferguson, the President of the Trade Union Congress, and Mr. Sloane Smith, the newly elected President of the Bahamas Customs and Immigration Union. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It's nice to have you here.
Yes,
and congratulations to you, Mr. Smith.
Yes, thank you.
The last time you were on this program, we had a little row.
I don't call it a row.
But we had
a spirited
discussion. Okay, very good. A spirited discussion. But today on our program, we hope to get to the bottom of a whole lot of issues that we have in the country. I said that you're not happy campers in the country, Obie Ferguson.
Mr. Jones, we are not. And just let me give you a quick overview. At Morton Salt, there was a strike vote.
Mm-hmm.
One worker voted against the strike. Customs and Immigration, there's a strike vote. Matter of fact, they have 2 strike votes, certificates. The nurses, Mr. Jones, they have just conducted a strike vote 2 days ago. The hotel in Grand Bahama, out of the entire workforce, there's about 1 worker who voted against the strike. At Sandals, you know, there's a strike vote. The principals who are responsible for all the schools in the Bahamas, they have just conducted a strike vote. We are moving towards a united position in order to deal with the issues.
So you have the majority of the unions in the TUC that had a strike vote, that have voted to strike?
Have voted to strike, and quite frankly, it's a question of timing. When we feel as a body it would be good for the union to collectively decide to take, I call it, a united stand. We have even the Ministry of Works, the workers there. I've just met with them. They have expressed an overwhelming position on this matter. The environmental health, we met with them no longer than, I think it was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And they have decided that they will be coming with the Congress to take a position in the interest of workers. And you know, Mr. Jones, I have been doing this for a while. And this is one time I can truly say, without a shadow of a doubt, that the workers of the Bahamas are committed to this united stand. And interestingly enough, persons who are not even, or traditionally not even union friendly, have decided that they will take a stand with us nationwide. So I think you can, and I'm saying Sloane is here, he can tell you, in our board meeting, there is no doubt that when we say, let us stand, the workers of the Bahamas would stand in order to get basic stuff, I consider, basic stuff resolved. So,
and I am happy you mentioned basic stuff. What are these basic things that you want? What are some of these basic needs? When I speak to trade union leaders, I ask them if it's all about money. Is that the bottom line?
Well, money is an issue, and money will always be an issue. But take for an example, you have the negotiation of an industrial agreement, Mr. Jones. I mean, to me, it just doesn't make sense that the government can't sit down with a trade union and work out terms and conditions. They refuse. to even meet. So it's one thing meeting and you have an impasse. But in some cases, like the educators, these are the people responsible for the schools. Mr. Jones, are you telling me it's going to take you 2 years to call Mr. Wildgoose up and say, look, we want to meet Monday and Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. As Malia, I'm negotiating a contract with Malia. You know what the man did? The personal manager wrote me a letter and he said, Mr. Ferguson, we'll meet with you on the 15th, on the 16th, on the 17th, and on the 18th, and on the 19th. From 9 to 5, 1 hour for lunch. So isn't that the way we're supposed to do it? But we cannot get the government agencies to do it. Sloane was on the other day talking, and I'm saying he will deal with this. But if you transfer a custom officer, say, to Eleuthera, Mr. Jones, you must at least give them the necessary basic money to take care of their utilities, because they have a rent, they have a mortgage here. Shouldn't the government consider those things? And to date, nothing has happened. We met with them. Mr. Smith gave them a list of what I call basic stuff when they transferred. Mr. Jones, today it isn't happening. So I'm trying to say, what do you do?
Well, you are very patient, aren't you, Sloane Smith? You're not a man who would sit idly by and allow these things to go unattended.
And you're quite right. It is why we took a strike poll on those very same issues. But Mr. Jones, why do we have to do that when the very document that governs us talks about transfers and disturbance allowances and stuff of that nature and mileage and all of that stuff? So, but look at it. If you're going to move me from here, it is only reasonable that you cover the cost, the expenses of me being somewhere else, because I'm also paying that stuff here. But then when you transfer me, you're asking me to bear the cost of additional utilities and all of that entails. Something is fundamentally wrong with that, though.
But aren't these matters that are attended by the Human Resources Department of a particular ministry? For instance, if an immigration officer is transferred, shouldn't the Human Resources Department in immigration deal with matters such?
Yeah, and cover the cost and all of that. The reality, that's not happening, though. So we sat at the table with the government and we suggested these very same things. But lo and behold, we see a recent signing of a document with the government and a particular body, and some of the very things we've asked for is in there. But we made the simple suggestion. We don't need an agreement to do that.
Right.
Because you're governed by general order. Everything is right there. But yet today, immigration is going through a transfer period right now, and you're asking persons to leave here. You likely will pay a portion of their rent. Depending on where it is, you may not pay all of it, so you're asking them to pay the balance. Mind you, they're paying mortgages and what have you here. Their family is still here, but you're going to ask them to find deposits for light and water and cable and those basic amenities. And you're asking them to pay gasoline allowance, which is certainly more than here in Nassau. Because on the family island, I think you're talking about, in some cases, $7.50 probably a gallon. So those basic things could be covered. But there's no willingness to literally do some of the most basic things we're asking for. So we move toward, if you're not going to do it, then the least we can do is take it to where we have some authority, and hopefully we don't have to walk out and strike to get the basic things.
Yeah, but I don't understand why these matters must relate to an agreement, or how they come into industrial relations negotiations. It seems to me that these are mundane matters.
Totally agree.
That should be attended to by the department that you're working with.
I fully agree, but the worst part of this is there are certain persons at certain ranks who they send out, and those very things I'm talking about are covered. But the very subordinate officers, they're not covered. It's almost as if they're saying, well, the supervisors are the main persons, they'll be covered, we'll cover them. But those younger officers and junior officers, they got to pay extra. That is heartless.
Could it be that the government is hard-pressed for revenue? Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Smith, and we all know the fiscal situation in the country. The government has been running huge deficits for years, and they complain that the revenue is simply not there. All of these matters that come before the unions that make up the TUC. Could it be that the government of the Bahamas is simply, they expect you to give them an opportunity to get the money, that they just simply do not have the money?
But even if that is the case, they ought to meet with the union. The union is not a group of people who are so insensitive, and we do not recognize the importance of our country. I think we all realize this country is going through a phase. But Mr. Jones, you know, is respect, man. And I said over and over and repeatedly, if the government met with the president of the Customs Union some time ago and said, okay, look, this is the situation. We can't do this now. We can do this later down. I'm certain Mr. Sloane would have gone to his board. They would have discussed it. I'm certain he would have gone to his membership. But nothing is happening, and that's the difficulty. And they're transferring people without regard to what he's suggesting. So he's left with no alternative but to take a stand against something that you say that's to be very mundane.
Yeah.
It ought not be. It's like increments. All increments ought not be a part of an industrial agreement. That's basic stuff. You perform your job, you do your job, you perform your job.
You expect that.
You expect to get an increment. But you don't sit down wasting hours, productive hours, because those officers could be working. You have productive hours, Mr. Jones, over increments.
So which ministry or department is responsible for not following through or meeting with you? It couldn't be the Ministry of Labor.
No, the Department of Public Personnel, Department of Public Service.
Which falls under the
Ministry, yes.
of Labor and National Insurance and Public Service.
Yes, so well, when we need issues, we go to the crux.
Yes.
We go to the people who could make the decisions. But what we find is there's almost like a wall when it comes to customs and immigration.
A firewall.
And I'm telling you, that wall need not be there, because we've only there's nothing we've really asked for outside of what is contained in general orders, you know. Nothing. But what we find is the very thing we are asking them for, they're still pushing our workers. They're still transferring the workers, but you're not offsetting the cost. As simple as a promotion. Most basic thing. 7 years ago, immigration had a promotion, the last promotion.
I understand one is in the offing now.
Listen, we say, let's see it. Let's see what you're saying. Because 3 financial clearances have already went back, which meant in the past year and a half, almost 2 years, they had 3 opportunities based on what they made provisions for, but it has gone back. And what was said to us by no less the Honorable Minister Shane Gibson, and this was said in 2012, that they were lacking performance appraisal reports. But when I saw him in the parking lot about 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks ago, same issue, what's the matter? Well, Honorable Minister says to me, well, Sloane, I think they're still waiting performance appraisal reports. But I would have spoken with Human Resource, and they said, we've sent copies upon copies down there. So there's some glitch between either the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Department of Public Service, but it cannot be a glitch between immigration and there. But see, there's also another element in this, Mr. Jones, that I'm realistic about. I suppose immigration and customs have been a pain to some degree. And it seems, and I hear my colleagues echo it, you know, we got to make it difficult for this grouping. We got to break them. And if that is in fact the case, I'm only saying an hypothesis based on what they're saying to me, then you're not going to win with that. Because all you're doing is irate, making those people more irate. As simple as them working overtime. General order says at the end of a month, you put that money on a voucher and you pay them for working what you ask them to work. They're off on their free time. You call them in because you need the people to be serviced. And they oblige you. But at the end of the month, they can't get it. So what we're finding is 4, 5, 6, 7 months later, they're not being paid. But those persons who've been signed in that agreement that gives them allowances to the tune of like $500 a month, 1,000 in the case, I suppose, of those who in Parliament, because the talk was recently they want to expand the monies given for the constituencies by $1,000. So the persons in Parliament getting $1,000, the heads of department getting $500, some PS I think getting beyond $500. And then what do you have? The small worker asking for their overtime that they can't get every month, but these people getting it every month. And then you're also giving those workers, roughly based upon what I see, you want to give them $1.67 a month.
What you mean $1.67 a month?
And I'm glad you asked. The only reason I'm bringing it up is when we sat in negotiations in 2012 with the government, they said whatever's agreed to by those who sit at the table, i.e. Public Service Union, that will apply to us. So if that is going to apply to us, I did the math on their financial plan. And in 5 years, they offered in the election year, the first year, it's already dealt with, supposed to be getting, I think, a lump sum of an increment by August of this year, which is now. Then they're going to have some type of review, salary review. And in the third year, which happens to be the election year, they're going to give them $1,200 or $100 a month. And in the fifth year, they're going to give them a lump sum. So what is meaningfully added to those persons? Income, where they can benefit from wage, gratuities, pensions, is only $100. So if you break that $100 up in 5 years, you would have given them $20 each. Just looking at it on average. $20 each, right? A year. You divide that into months, $1.67. Basically, that's what you're going to get a month. And per day, it's literally 5 cents. So you're asking me to accept on behalf of my colleagues who put me in the position. Something fundamentally wrong with that. It impacts the police force, because I heard the minister say they're going to give the same thing to the police, same thing to the defense force, same thing to prison. What are you telling these workers? And then you expect us to feel as though we should be comfortable and grateful. No, something wrong. You're getting your $1,000, so you're not bothered by that. And you're getting that at the end of the month. The workers in customs and immigration, what are they getting? Nothing. We're only talking about the overtime for customs and immigration at this point. At least, like we suggested to them, pay it every month. Relieve the burden. Take some of that tension off. But for the wider public service that have gotten that particular contract, Mr. Jones, something fundamentally wrong, man. The small man can't get it, but the big man getting it. Something wrong with that.
The bottom line is money. And the bottom line has to do with the extent to which the government is able to afford the size of the public service.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Ferguson.
We can touch it.
Let's talk about
I agree with you.
the size of the service. We're talking about salaries and personal emoluments. And if you look at the budget of the Bahamas, the national budget, you would find that the vast majority of the money goes towards salaries and personal emoluments.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? And so, in Barbados, they cut the size of the public service by thousands. The government probably would need to do that in order to bring about
before I even get
relief.
to that. Before I even get to that, Mr. President, if you don't mind.
Yes?
Let me just say this. In immigration right now, there's about 45 new officers who came in.
Mm-hmm.
Notwithstanding what you just outlined, the challenges of government to find revenue and all that stuff, right? To the tune of about 1 million and maybe 1,100,000. That's what you're bringing those persons in under. Now that's a recurrent expense every year.
Yes.
So the issue isn't so much that the union has to be concerned necessarily about that. What seems to be the issue is the willingness of the government to be fiscally prudent and to take this Gussie May public service in hand, right?
Yes.
And use the FIFO method. The first in, first out. Not what they were suggesting we do. But the last in, last out, those young people need jobs. So maybe we need to look at the top. When I was here last, I talked to you about this. See, but the blame cannot be pushed toward the trade unions. You're saying we're looking for and we're always asking. But guess what I just outlined to you? You're not giving us nothing anyway.
You are suggesting that there is an inefficiency.
There's a serious inefficiency.
In dealing with the personnel of the government of the Bahamas.
Yeah, but we know what routinely happens. Election period comes around. I can tell you the very last election, in immigration, I was sitting there, and a whole group of persons showed up. 1 week, a group of persons showed up. The next week, right before election, another group. So we're bringing people on because we're interested only in the next 5 years and our re-engagement as parliamentarians. Because ultimately what they're looking at is what? 10 years in there in that particular role, and I'm going to get that huge pension. It seems like a lot of people are operating from a position of fear that they can't make it otherwise. So let's get into that parliament and let's handle our business and take care of us and our people's future. But they're doing it on the backs of these workers. What do you expect the workers in this country to do down at Ministry of Works? They looked at that contract that was signed and they saw it as pittance, 5 cents a day over 5 years. But what do you expect them to do? They have sought to align with the TUC and us specifically. And what has happened? In short order, they'll be under our umbrella. And I can assure you, Mr. Jones, and we don't threaten anybody. So nobody need to think we are threatened. We don't threaten no government. Who are we to threaten a government? But we do have rights. And we'll explore that under the law. That's it.
Let's take a break here. This is Jones and Company, and we are listening to the grievances of unions around the country. We'll come right back.